What's the most badass thing you did completely by accident? Story 1. I was sitting on a patio with friends, and a friend who was absolutely terrified of roaches started screaming and running around because a roach appeared on the top of the patio about 25 feet away from me. As a joke, I casually stood up, whipped out my pocket knife, and while talking, I threw it. It went spinning through the air and stuck the roach to the wood. I sat back down and finished what I was saying while everyone was in disbelief. We all had a good laugh and they nicknamed me Crocodile Dundee. Reminds me of my own roach story, not nearly as badass. I live in South Carolina, and we have these things colloquially called palmetto bugs. They're really just large flying cockroaches, and I'm not crapping you when I say large. The Wikipedia article is very understated. I've seen them surpass 3 inches long often. I also happen to have a fascination with rudimentary weaponry, so I happen to have a blowgun. One day, I saw one of these creepers in my shower. Gigantic one, too. So big, I'm sure he paid taxes. I think his name was Steve. Anyway, I see this creeper, bust out the blowgun, and choose a stun dart for this one. Though I do like impaling the creepers, too. In case the pick isn't obvious, a stun dart is basically the blowgun equivalent of throwing a brick at something. It's just a blunt impact, although fairly small. So I load it up in my 3-inch blowgun and take careful aim, expecting to try shooting it at this creeper trapped in my shower 5 to 10 times before I hit it. But on the first shot, I was so pissed off at this freaking thing being in my goddamn bathroom I channeled some rage into my diaphragm and really cut loose. A surge from the diaphragm, a nicely timed removal of my tongue from the end of the blowgun, a little more force than I probably should have used, cheek discomfort, a little ear discomfort, and the dart flies from the end. Not surprisingly, this ginormous freaking cockroach disappears. Usually this means I scared the heck out of it, and the thing has run somewhere else. I look around for a moment and see it lying in the bottom of the tub, writhing but not running around. This is odd because even a good solid hit won't usually kill them instantly. And I fully expected the creeper to be running around unscathed or just wounded, but no, it wasn't running, just squirming. Also, it looks a little odd, so I lean in for a closer look, and it seems to be smaller. In fact, it's missing its head, and some thorax. Huh, where the hell did they go? So I look around for a bit and finally find the head and torso, stuck to the adjacent wall from the one the roach was on about 3 feet away. I'd hit the damn thing square in the thorax, and so hard that its head and part of its thorax shot about 3 feet and stuck to the wall. No pictures, unfortunately. I thought I had one pre-explosive decapitation, but I can't seem to find it now. Story 2. About 15 years ago, my ex-wife and I were at a party, sitting across from each other at a fairly large table. We were surrounded by dozens of friends, some sitting, some standing and chatting in the kitchen. She had my Zippo and I wanted a smoke, so I asked her to toss it to me. She tossed the Zippo to me across the table. The lid popped open in mid-air. Somehow I hit the roller with my thumb as I caught it, and the damn thing lights up as it hits my hand. My arm was fully outstretched when I caught it, so I smoothly pulled my arm in, lit the cigarette in my mouth, snapped the Zippo shut with a flick of the wrist, and tossed it back to her with one fluid motion. Half the people at the table jumped up in amazement and begged us over and over again to perform the trick one more time. We refused. I never told a soul that the whole event was completely accidental. My friends still talk about it with awe. I had a quite similar experience. I was at a small venue concert and my buddy had a Bic lighter. I signal him to toss me the lighter, and so he does. I was watching the lighter fly through the air, realizing that it was not going to make it to me, but rather a foot or so away. As it approaches, I calmly bring my foot up as if I were playing hacky sack and connect with the lighter. It sucked a kick that the lighter flew up to about chest level, and I caught it and lit my smoke. Afterward, I place the lighter back into my pocket and begin my smoking experience. I look over at said friend and he has a look of disbelief. Then I look next to him and one of our mutual friends is standing there and he says, "That was the most badass thing I've ever seen anybody do." I smiled like it was intentional, but in reality I was thinking, did I really just do that? Anywho, it was not as good as yours, but I thought it was relevant. Story 3. Me and my then 3-year-old son went to the playground. This bigger kid arrived and started going around scaring the crap out of the littler kids by popping out and roaring and hissing and whatnot right in their faces. I saw what car came in and that his mom was sitting in it still, maybe just waiting for him to finish playing. Anyway, he proceeds to do his scary thing to my son, who of course freaks out and runs to me crying. I started fuming. Thinking it was his own parents' responsibility to tell him to cut that crap out, I decided to go tell his mom. I ask, "Is that your son over there?" She says yes, and I tell her what he's doing. "Either you get him to stop or I'll do it for you." To my surprise, she says, "Oh, please do. I can't control him today." So I go back over and try my best to hide right where he is roaming, and as soon as he's within striking distance, I pop out and with all my air in my lungs, I scream at the top of my lungs, 1 inch from his freaking face. He ran back to his car, absolutely terrified and crying. I could see his mom. She didn't come out or do anything. To this day, if anyone messes with my son, who's bigger than him, he screams nonsensically in their face. Story 4. When I was about 11 years old, I got chased by 2 vicious, hungry-looking Dobermans in a car yard. I realized I wasn't going to get away, so I turned around, put on my war face, and bolted straight at them, shouting like I was possessed and intending to tear their freaking snouts off. The dogs disappeared with the tails between their legs. I felt like a big man. I did this once with a huge Rottweiler. That dog was chained next to a road I walked on a couple of times a day. He was freaking vicious and kept chained next to his doghouse in the corner of the lot with about a half-inch chain. It was said he'd killed at least a couple of cats. I would always ignore him, but one night about midnight I was walking home and he started running at me as usual. But then I heard the unmistakable sign of wood breaking and the chain dragging across the ground. I turned and the dog was running at me with murder in his eyes. I just thought about what his owner would do, so I turned to face him and bellowed, "Shut the hell up, you pussy!" He turned tail and obediently returned to his house. The owner came out and was angry at me for breaking his guard dog. I woke up early one morning when I was 13 to the sound of my mom yelling at the neighbor. The neighbor had a German Shepherd that was becoming a problem in the neighborhood, loud barking all day and night. Anyway, I run outside wearing only boxers and holding a katana. I get there just in time to see the dog, unleashed, charging at my mom with violence in his eyes. Having understood dogs for most of my life, I knew exactly what to do. I let out a 13-year-old boy's war cry and charged at the dog, screaming like a psychopath, katana ready. Let me tell you, that dog turned around fast. It was an awesome moment. To this day, I have to get my mom to back me up because people don't believe me. Concur, and to throw in my scaring away dogs moment. We had a new family move into the neighborhood. They had 2 Australian Shepherds and another dog that is usually sweet but often has a bad reputation. Unfortunately, these 3 dogs were determining territory in the new neighborhood, and since we didn't really have a leash law back where we lived, they often came over to our house. This is why I ended up on a wooden fence post, trying to avoid the snarling angry dog and the 2 shepherds that wanted to herd me into the angry dog's teeth. When the owners ran over, terrified as to what was happening, the dogs became sweet little babies. A few weeks later, though, I walked home from the bus stop to see that our door was wide open. We lived in the back of a gated community with houses that could be seen from the street, so I assumed nothing was wrong until I heard barking. Turns out the 3 territorial dogs had cornered our whippet in my parents' bedroom and looked ready to rip his throat out. As soon as I walked in, I yelled an angry, impulsive, "Get the hell out!" to which they responded by bolting home. I wish I had thought of that on the fence. I also wish I didn't have to wipe up the crap that was splattered all over the wall from the terrified whippet. I felt bad for the owners. They had 3 dogs that they were desperately trying to control with an underground fence and discipline, and as soon as they found out that the dogs had mauled our obnoxiously ugly Chihuahua, they immediately demanded to pay the vet's bill. They ended up moving, but that was because our HOA was being a sack of pricks. Story 5. I was in a restaurant with my girlfriend at the time, when a big guy built like a refrigerator just came barging through and knocked my girlfriend's drink all over her. It was clearly an accident based on his refrigerator-like physique and being unable to hold his arms at his side. At this point, I'm standing up to help clean her up and figure he's going to apologize or something. Instead, he pushes my shoulder and tells me to get out of the way and let the bitch clean herself up. I stare at him and say, "That bitch is my girlfriend. You damn well better apologize to her." So the woman and man at the next table to us are notably getting nervous, so she drops her menu off the table. By some fluke, I catch the menu flat along the top of my foot before it hits the ground and proceed to just raise my foot, keeping the menu on top of it. I grab the menu into my hand, all the while glaring into this guy's eyes. I just told her, "Sorry, ma'am, you seem to have dropped this." I just look at him and say, "So I think we left it off where you were going to apologize to my girlfriend for being so rude and then walking around." Much to my surprise, he turned to my girlfriend and said, "I'm terribly sorry," and then turned around and walked away. Our check was taken care of as well. I've caught light things like pieces of paper on the top of my foot, but never something like a menu, and I was always terrible at hacky sack. If that was me, I would have dropped the menu off of my foot, bent down to get it, slammed my head on the table, thrown my arm up and accidentally hit the guy in the nuts, and then got my shirt caught on the table standing back up, and ripped it almost off. Meanwhile, spilling salsa all over my head. Your outcome was commendable. Story 6. I worked at a Boy Scout camp years and years ago. One of the activities I was in charge of was building a log cabin. Part of building the log cabin is to strip all the bark of the wood to help keep the logs from rotting. The Scouts generally had a love/hate relationship with this step of the project. On the plus side, they got to use sharp objects. On the minus side, it was hard manual labor. While they were using bark strippers, I was using a chisel to get the bark off around knots. Normally, using a chisel on wood is not a hazardous operation as long as the blade is facing away from you. One day, I was not doing well in my safety observance. I was trying to jam a stubborn piece of bark off the wood with the blade facing toward my arm. The wood broke against the force. The blade kept on trucking through the bark and into my wrist. At this point, the Scouts knew something was wrong as they saw me curse, drop the chisel, and grab my arm. I was the only adult present, so I was fighting to keep my calm so as to not panic the Scouts. My solution was to turn it into a first aid lesson. I told a couple of Scouts to get the first aid kit and the others to help me over to the picnic bench. I told them they were going to have an impromptu first aid lesson on severe bleeding and shock with the victim as their instructor. The Scouts were able to keep their heads together and get the health officer out to our location to treat me the rest of the way. They said it was their best first aid class they ever had. A very similar thing happened to my father-in-law. When he was helping us scrape linoleum off of our floor, using a razor knife, he was scraping towards himself, and the flooring gave way a little too easily. And the knife went into his wrist. He was not very happy with himself since he was a shop teacher on the west side of Chicago for 30 years, and helped multiple generations of families not cut towards themselves with anything sharp. Well, he hit multiple tendons and had to have surgery and PT to fix it up. Why is it always the experts who ignore the rules? Story 7. At the end of the high school year in gym class, when it was too hot to do anything outside, the bleachers would be out in the gym and 95% of people would sit on them, while the 5% who wanted to do something would be shooting some hoops while they waited for the period to be over. I was in that 5%, but there was an idiot kid who would always try to run up and steal the basketball and throw it all the way across the gym. If he ever touched the ball, you know you would have to go 200 to get it back. If he didn't steal it from you the first time, he would tackle people to the ground and get it and throw it. Huge douche. He was strolling towards me one day and I knew what he was planning, so when he was about 10 feet from me, I just sprinted down the court towards the other side of the gym with the ball in my hand, and he took chase. About halfway down the court, where everyone was sitting on the bleachers, I decided to ditch the ball so I could run faster and not get tackled from behind by a pretty meaty dude. I threw the ball basically straight up as I was running, and by some freak of luck, he did not see the ball coming down and it blasted him exactly on his face, and he fell on his ass and was rolling around, confused for a while everyone laughed at him. After I saw what happened, I ran to the top end of the bleachers because I figured it would be safer if he couldn't find me. But right after he got up, he spotted me and stormed up the bleachers like he was going to beat the crap out of me. He got up in my face trying to start a fight, but I didn't want to do anything due to my school's very strict no-fighting policy. So I just held up my hands politely like, "What do you want me to do?" After about a minute of him screaming at me and everyone watching intently, he decided he wanted to shove me, but he somehow didn't realize that I was sitting against a wall and would therefore not move very much. He tried to push me, but instead he just flung his own body down the bleacher stairs and slid all the way to the bottom. He ended up getting suspended for fighting, and all I got was props from the entire class. Story 8. I'm a little late to the game, but here it goes. I used to work at a ski resort in Pennsylvania, so I'd be out riding all kinds of crazy conditions. One particular day, the snow was really granulated to the point where you could get stuck in it. I was riding down a steep slope going quite fast and hit a pile of granulated snow that almost brought me to a complete stop. My reflexes told me to lean forward and tuck, so instead of a devastating fall, I was picked up off the ground by my momentum and did a front flip on my board, landing perfectly and sliding away. I think one or two other instructors saw it. I did the opposite. I'm a decent snowboarder. I landed my first backflip when I was 11. Fast forward a few years later, I was at Okemo Mountain, and I had just landed a backflip off of one of the kickers. I was approaching the very last jump. It was a 40-foot, 12 meters jump, with a very poorly built takeoff. The previous time I didn't quite clear the jump, so I came in with a little bit more speed and was in a tuck. The lip threw me backwards / off balance, and I thought for sure I was going to land on my back or neck. It was kind of icy. Somehow I kept rotating, and while I was almost upside down, I knew the only thing I could do at this point was try not to fight the rotation momentum. I landed it. I accidentally performed and landed a backflip. I couldn't believe what had just happened. There were a few people around, but nobody would have been able to tell that it was not on purpose. I accidentally did the same thing in a game of soccer. I was sprinting up behind someone at full speed, and my foot tripped over his foot somehow. I'm not sure exactly how it happened, but I was launched up into the air. I spiraled my feet downward, trying to connect with the ground, but I was actually too high up to reach the ground. Instead, I tucked forward and hit the ground in a ninja roll and did a perfect roll and stood back up perfectly fine. To the people on the sidelines, it looked like I did basically a flip randomly. Every few years, my family would go on a ski trip out west. My brother and I always did snowboard school with an instructor and some other kids, even though we were decent snowboarders. One year, my brother and I were separated because he was more skilled than I. I unwillingly admit this for readers to comprehend more clearly. But I didn't care because I was in an awesome group with some older kids. They were about 14, I was around 12. So this one kid and I got into a heated snowball fight behind our instructor's back. Snowball fights were not allowed, of course, in snowboard school. The fight is really becoming exciting even though I am getting owned. Then we went down a steep blue run, and I was unprepared. I was holding a beautifully crafted snowball, and I suddenly fell forward. I started rolling and rolling and rolling. I rolled through one of those intersections known as a catwalk and skimmed past a little girl. I was rolling for a good 30 seconds before it happened. Suddenly, in one motion, I stop, stand straight up, strapped onto a snowboard to my fullest height, and glimpse my instructor trying to help me nearby as she stretches out her arms to slow me down. But I didn't care because I saw the kid I had been at war with, 10 feet ahead of me. This was the moment, if ever, for this snowball, and I hurled the snowball at him, then continue rolling for 2 rotations and stop. But in these 2 rotations I saw bits and pieces of my hitting this kid in the face as he glanced back, saying, "What the wham?" And suddenly he falls and slides down 20 yards to the bottom of the run. Everyone was mega impressed. I have to admit, I felt awesome. My instructor was laughing with the rest of the group when we rejoined at the bottom. Apparently she had been aware of this snowball fight the whole time, but she let it go because it was entertaining. I never told my brother of this thoroughly awesome experience, but I know he is a Reddit addict, so I assume there's a chance he'll see it. Story 9. I catch rattlesnakes for a living in Phoenix, Arizona as an emergency response service for people who find a snake in their yard, etc. Most calls are diamondbacks, but 1 in 4 or so rattlesnakes end up being a large constrictor called a gopher snake. Gopher snakes can be aggressive, but they're otherwise harmless. On one call, there was a kid about 15 who was absolutely terrified of a rattlesnake he saw along the back wall of his yard behind the swimming pool. The only way to really get there was to tightrope it across the narrow ledge of the pool. I got there and saw that it wasn't a rattlesnake at all, but a harmless gopher snake. So I reached down and grabbed the 5-foot snake. It was an asshole about the whole thing, striking at my face repeatedly and getting me on the forearm. I grabbed it closer to the head and wrestled it into control as I made my way back across the ledge to the bucket, where I unwrapped him from my arm and body and put it in the bucket. I then realized I forgot to tell the kid that it wasn't a rattlesnake before doing that. I looked up and he looked like he was going to vomit or pass out. Probably the palest I've ever seen a living person. He surely believed he was about to see a man die. I now routinely forget to tell homeowners that it's just a gopher snake. Once while riding my bike to work, I saw a guy ahead of me stop and get off his bike. When I caught up to him, I saw him hyperventilating and heard him whispering, "Snake, snake, 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 snake." Seeing that it was just a gopher snake, I got off my bike, walked over to it, and bent down next to it, pointed to the head and was just about to say, "See the shape of," when I looked up and realized that I'd just sent the guy into an even more severe fit of panic. Oops. We have a lot of rattlesnakes here. At the right time of year, I pass as many as 4 or 5 in a single commute on the bike trail. Story 10. About 5 years ago, there was a crazy huge bee in my house, and my brother, terrified of bees, came running to me wanting me to kill it for him. I picked up my crappy toy airsoft pistol, which was loaded with 1 pellet, pointed the pistol at the bee from about 40 feet away, didn't aim at all, pulled the trigger and saw a splat on the other side of the room. Story 11. I was at a college football game for MSU in Missouri. I was up in the nosebleeds after a marching band had played in the homecoming parade earlier that day. I left to go get concessions and started walking down the stairs. I tripped suddenly and began tumbling. Over and over, down, down, down. Over stairs, across landings, flailing hopelessly for purchase on one of the handrails or an onlooker's appendage, but with no avail. It seemed to never end. I eventually reached the bottom where the landing divided left and right to leave the mezzanine, which meant there was a bit of concrete and a handrail directly in front of me. I hit the handrail with my lower back almost fully upside down, and still locked in the kinetic tour de force of my fall, I rocked over the handrail with my lumbar as a fulcrum. Dropped the meter or so to the ground and landed feet first, in such a state of confusion that I just started walking as if nothing had happened. The whole section erupted in cheers to the point it made people on the field look up at us. I did this at Lilith Fair once years ago. Hey, if you're 19 and a gang of lesbians invites you to hang out with them, you don't say no. I was up in lawn seating and headed down towards concessions, and there was a large muddy track going down the hillside. I slipped and skated down it on 1 foot, knowing putting my other foot down would only turn my momentum into a serious face-planting type of problem. At the bottom of the incline was a stone retaining wall that dropped several feet down to bench seating level. My sliding foot hit this unlubricated stone and went out from under me, a full flip in the air and landing on the other foot, hopping once or twice like a gymnast trying to balance a landing. I heard applause and shouts from all around and noticed that the crowd had watched my nearly ass-busting event. I later found out the whole thing was on tape from the crowd reaction cameras and was on that year's tour video release, though I haven't acquired a copy. Story 12. I'm in San Diego with 2 girlfriends for the weekend. We're bar hopping and end up at this huge noisy club. At this point, we're all completely wasted. We see someone come on stage and say there will be a girls versus boys contest and they would pick 6 contestants. Of course, I'm the lucky one to get picked as one of the female contestants. The club is incredibly loud, so I can't really hear the instructions, but I get the gist. Each person must take a shot while wearing a boxing glove with one hand behind their back. The team who finishes all 3 shots first wins. I then heard the audience gasping, but I didn't catch what the announcer said. So the game begins. The first 2 girls in front of me take their shots, as do the 2 boys. At this point, it's a dead heat. I'm up next, and the guy I'm up against is having a real hard time taking the shot. Looking at it with disgust, not picking it up. I wonder what the hell is wrong with him since it's just a stupid tequila shot, so I pick it up with my boxing glove and swing it up with a smile on my face. The audience gasps again and starts screaming and cheering. I won the contest and had free drinks for the night. Afterward, people are coming up to shake my hand and pat me on the back. After getting another drink, I met up with one of my friends. She says, "That was amazing! I can't believe you ate that worm!" What? I frantically asked her what was in the shot. She looks at me with utter disbelief and says, "There was a huge tequila worm at the bottom of the glass. Did you not see it?" Apparently I was too drunk to notice and hadn't heard them say that there was a huge freaking worm at the bottom of the glass. I gagged and freaked out for a moment, but then settled into a nice, "Hell yeah." Story 13. My little brother comes running to the house telling me that his friend is getting beat up by some bigger kids. The playground isn't far from us, so I throw on my coat and my shades and run out there. I can see the kid on his knees on the ground with 6 other bigger kids around him, kicking at him and spitting on him. One of them points at me coming and the others turn toward me. There is a 4-foot-high fence around the playground, and instead of going around, I put my hand on top and leap over it, throwing my legs over. My black trench coat billows out behind me, my small round mirrored glasses glinting in the sunlight. Once over the fence, I kept walking quickly and purposefully directly at the 6 of them. A couple of them start to back up, and so I start running at them. They all turned and scrambled away, pushing each other to get out of the gate faster. I chased after them for a little bit, but they all ran away. It was a definite badass moment. Story 14. High school. Sitting at the nerd/geek table during lunch. The jocks sat at a table across the aisle about 15 feet away. As usual, they were making fun of us, and one of them decided to throw balls of tinfoil at us while the rest were laughing away. After the 3rd time, I pick one of them up and chuck it at the kid doing the throwing. It hits him square in the forehead. He's furious. He stomps over to me and punches me in the face while I'm sitting down. I was later told by my friends that the punch didn't look like it even fazed me. I stood up to my full lanky height of 6'3" at the time, and just stared at him menacingly, without saying a word. This kid was 5'10" and muscular, and his eyes were now huge. He made the walk of shame back to his table, and I sat down to notice all of my friends' mouths were partly open. I had become a nerd god. The jocks never bothered us in the cafeteria or elsewhere ever again. They gave me a neutral look in the hallways while passing. Every time that I saw that one kid, his head was down and he never made eye contact with me again. TLDR, how it came to pass that neither myself nor my friends were ever bullied again. I played soccer in high school and was one of the 2 grade 9 students to make the senior team. Being a 15-year-old, 6'2" scrawny little kid, I was put on the outside left midfield position. Apparently, in one game there was a ball kicked way out into the open in my territory, so it was a straight-up dash between me and the other team's player to get it. I got there first and felt him try to kick it away from me, but I took it and passed it forward. I called for a substitution on the next whistle, and the coaches asked me if I was okay. I said yes, not sure what they were getting at. Apparently the opponent, probably 5'10" with a solid 30 pounds on me, ran straight into me, bounced off of me and landed on his back. To me, it felt like he tried hip checking, but I guess I had some sort of rock-solid stance at that moment, and he couldn't even budge me. Story 15. This happened in my skydiving years. It was a Saturday morning. There was a group of girls from the nearby college wanting to jump, so the daring, including myself, wanted to do a hop and pop to show the girls what skydiving looks like. We get to altitude, jump, deploy our chutes, and start to show off our crazy canopy skills. I decided that I would do a hook turn. They look cool from the ground, and my canopy colors are blue and pink. Well, after some tugs on my toggles, my hook turn collapses my canopy and it turns into a low hook turn. Low hook turns usually end up with a visit to the hospital or the morgue, usually the latter. With my canopy folded over, I'm making revolutions. My altitude is too low to cut away and use my reserve, so I think to myself, well, this is it. I hope this doesn't hurt too bad. I hope I can walk away. On the bright side, my lines didn't wrap around the canopy, so there is a possibility that I can pull it out before impact. From the people on the ground, all they saw were some skydivers coming in for a landing, swinging like a pendulum, and some of them coming in to kick this inflatable target we had at our DZ. They could tell that something wasn't right with one of the divers, me, because his chute wasn't open, and he was spinning parallel to the ground. The most important thing to do in skydiving is to make everything you do look cool. Atheists, bear with me here. With 100 feet to go before impact, I pump my toggles, release, and my canopy unfurls and inflates as if the hands of God raked his fingers through my lines and pulled my canopy tight. This put my body position perpendicular with no inches to spare for a walk-in landing. The crowd applauds with oohs and ahs, including the experienced divers who knew what was happening. I bow, gather my stuff, and go into the clubhouse to calm my nerves. My buddies told the students, he does that all the time, and they knew I was shaken. I met my old dive buddies a few months ago. We live in different states now, and they brought up that experience as one of the craziest things they have ever seen. Thanks for watching until the end. If you have a similar story to these that you want to share with us, please leave it in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, please leave us a like and subscribe. For more videos like this one right now, please stop by our channel. Thanks again, and see you next time.